Israelis want to move from a situation where they have a sort of rough ground control of Gaza, when they can stop this aerial bombardment, to then doing more targeted raids on the tunnel network, more specific operations against Hamas breakaway groups, whatever you call them.
Can I ask you first for the latest on the ground in the war?
So the latest in the ground of the war is pretty much the same. I mean, it's very slow progress. It is progress, but it's slow progress for the Israelis in Gaza, and of course, devastating consequences for the civilian population of Gaza, as we know. Heart-rending tales come out every day. The one that struck me today was a little girl, a 12-year-old girl, who was in hospital, having lost a leg in an airstrike that killed her parents and two of her siblings. The ward was hit by a artillery shell, and she was killed, having been struck the second time. And she'd been interviewed by a couple of TV channels about her experiences in that hospital, with her, her missing leg, visible. Just heartrending stories. But Israel are making progress. They say they've totally cleared now one area of Gaza called Beit Hanun, which is in the northeast. If you think it's now 7 weeks since they went in, that shows the time scale you're talking about to clear one area, but that includes its tunnels. I actually spoke to one of the officers who was clearing those tunnels a couple of weeks ago, and he described what slow progress it had to be because of the risk of Hamas fighters coming out of those tunnels. The war is making slow. It is just going forward at a slow and grinding and pace at huge human cost.
Slow and grinding pace, but stories like that, a little girl and other children, stories of whole families being wiped out, and all coming out in real time on social media, the way the news does now. It can only have an effect on the way people, across the world, think about this conflict. Now we're seeing calls for restraint and criticism of Israel coming louder and more explicitly than in the recent past. As far as you can judge, Richard, what are those inside the Israeli government thinking about the messages they're getting from key allies like America and also from Britain? What do they think privately, whatever they may say publicly?
Very good question. Hard to say. And of course, they're by no means a united government. That's one issue. Netanyahu, of course, faces calls from the international community, many countries, even allies like Britain now, calling for a sustained ceasefire. These countries like Britain, which stood very closely beside Israel at the beginning of this war, the Biden administration, most importantly, of course, also calling for restraint. But Netanyahu is also trying to hold a coalition together, which relies on far-right support. And indeed, he's got a very aggressive defense minister from his own party, Yoav Gallant, a former general himself, a former head of the Gaza command, in fact, who, as you may have heard in that press conference with Lloyd Austin, was, insistent that they were doing what they could to reduce civilian casualties, but that the goals of the operation remain the same.
Yeah. Is there any sense then, even among some of those hardliners, that time may be running out for the all-out aggressive nature of the campaign that Israel's fighting?
So there is a lot of talk of a phased campaign, and that you will have also heard mention of in that press conference. This is quite a complex thing, and we can only guess what it means. But I think it's quite an educated guess that the Israelis want to move from a situation where they have a sort of rough ground control of Gaza, when they can stop this aerial bombardment, to then doing more targeted raids on the tunnel network, more specific operations against Hamas breakaway groups, whatever you call them. And they hope that will satisfy American demands to say, the war hasn't ended, but that phase of the war that you hated watching on your TV stations has ended. And that then becomes a question of when might that happen? Now, as I think I may have said to you before, this is only speculation. I mean, my speculation isn't worth much, but it seems to be sort of reasonably accepted that the Israeli army think they need several more weeks even to move to that next phase, possibly the end of January, possibly into February, and several months of, still targeting Hamas on the ground before the war can be declared over. The Americans want this stage of the war to end much quicker than that. They're talking like first week in January, and I'm sure there'll be some slippage on that, but there's a big chasm still there.